On December 1st, 1956, a French World War II veteran lined up at the start of the Olympic marathon, and everything looked like it was against him. His name was Alain Mimoun. He was born in Algeria to a very poor family. He was the oldest of 7 children, and although he was very talented academically, he had to quit school at age 11 because other less qualified, better connected students were promoted ahead of him. So he started to work full-time at age 11. He got a job as a mason, and then later he was lucky to get a job at a hardware store. But by age 18, World War II was blazing through Europe. So he joined the French army to fight against the Nazis. After his basic training, he was assigned to patrol the French-Belgium border. But when the Germans were able to cut through Belgium like it was nothing and started to head south, he and his unit were forced to flee, narrowly evading capture. Later the next summer, where he was stationed in a place where things were a little bit more settled, he saw a local track meet going on. He'd never ran before, but on a whim, he decided to enter the track meet. There, he won the 1,500-meter race, even though the champion there had won 6 years in a row. Inspired by how good that went, he entered into the 5,000 meters and ran a sub-16-minute 5,000, just because that's how he rolls. Then he got transferred to Algeria, where he started to train really seriously for running. But World War II was still going on, and he was still in the army. So he was redeployed to fight against the Axis powers in Italy. And on January 28th, 1944, a shell exploded right in front of him, sending shrapnel shredding through his leg. He was taken to a field hospital, and the doctors there recommended amputating his leg. He pleaded with them not to cut off his leg. So fortunately for him, one of the doctors decided to try the operation. He was able to dig all the shrapnel out, stop the bleeding, and Alain was able to go and rest and recover for months. But his legs cut up, was severely weakened from this experience. Once he was all healed up, he was sent back to the French army to fight his way into France from the Mediterranean and then on to invade Germany and end the war. Once the war was over, he decided not to go back to Algeria where he had faced such hardship. Instead, he settled in Paris and started to train seriously to become an athlete. Now, there's no such thing as really a professional athlete back in the day. Everybody was amateur. And being an amateur athlete, unless you come from a very rich family, is not easy. He said, I was a cafe waiter. I did not have enough to eat. He said, I won 4 Olympic medals while I was living in a small 2-room apartment without heating, shower, or toilet. But such suffering helped him. In the 1946 French National Championship race, he was able to come in second, even though he lost his shoe in the middle of the race. He was willing to suffer. He was able to suffer. Mimoun was an outstanding runner. He was able to get silver medals in the 1948 and 1952 Olympics. And the only reason they were silver is that he happened to be running against one of the greatest runners of all time, Emil Zatopek. So, in 1956, with a mustache and a white handkerchief tied around his head, lining up next to Emil Zatopek, one of the greatest of all time, to start the Olympic marathon, it didn't really look like Mimoun had a chance. Everyone said he was too old. He had just taken 12th in the 10,000 in the Olympics. Not to mention the fact that right now, as the Olympics marathon started, it was 100 degrees in the shade. And then there was the fact that Emil was racing against him and the whole shrapnel and leg thing. But, Mimoun had just received a telegram yesterday from his wife telling him that she had just had their first baby girl, healthy and happy. But and in addition to that, he just got his race number, which was number 13, which he, like Taylor Swift, considered to be his lucky number. Additionally, he knew something that nobody else knew. The 10,000 was never his goal. The marathon was his goal. He said for the last 2 years, he had been gorging himself, is the word he used, on 25 miles a day, sometimes training 3 times a day to get ready for this grueling event. So when the gun fired off, he took off with a lead pack. By mile 10, the whole field had been narrowed down to 13 men, the heat already taking its toll. By mile 13, because of the oppressive heat and the fast pace, there were only 5 men in the lead pack. At that moment, American John Kelly patted Mimoun on the back and said, "Let's go." So they broke away, the two of them. And once those two got to an uphill, Mimoun laid on a blistering surge on the uphill, opening up a 50-second gap on him and the rest of the field. By mile 19, he had a huge gap, but he was beginning to tire. The 100+ degree temperature, the grueling pace were all taking a toll. He took the handkerchief he had tied around his head and he tossed it on the ground, saying by this point it felt like it weighed a ton on his head. He was fading hard, but he saw something that inspired him. A pretty blonde woman picked up his handkerchief and blew him a kiss. And it was just this moment of distraction from his pain, recharged him, and he surged forward towards gold. But even that motivation started to fade. He started yelling to himself in his mind, "Don't you stop! You'll lose seconds." So during the last 3 miles, he wouldn't even stop for water, not wanting anybody to catch up to him. He would yell insults to himself in his mind to get himself going. He thought of his mother sacrificing so much for him and his family in poverty in Algeria. He thought of what he went through in World War II, the suffering, the loss, the pain in his leg, the recovery. Finally, he thought of his wife and their new baby. And the fuel of these thoughts drove him forward to finish 1 minute and 32 seconds ahead of everyone else. He was Olympic champion, even over Emil Zatopek. So what does this mean for us? Well, I'll let you draw your own conclusions, but I would ask, how are you going to turn your pain into fuel? It doesn't have to stop you. You can fuel it forward. How are you going to take your mind off pain and suffering and turn it to something great? Pretty girls blowing him a kiss, thoughts of the people he loved and the sacrifices he made? You can do similarly. Great things can happen. See you next time.